The first thing I noticed about him was his shoes. I know that sounds strange. I know you're expecting me to say I noticed his face, or the way he was breathing too hard, or the blood on his sleeve that he was pressing against the brick wall like he could push it back inside himself if he just held on long enough. But I was 8 years old, and I had learned very early that you could tell everything about a person by their shoes. My mama taught me that. She said, baby, when a man walks into a room, don't look at his face first because faces lie. Look at his shoes. Shoes will tell you if a man takes care of things. Shoes will tell you if a man respects himself. And a man who doesn't respect himself cannot respect you. His shoes cost more than our rent. I didn't know that at the time, of course. I was 8. I didn't know what rent cost because my mama never talked about money in front of me, even though I could hear her at the kitchen table late at night when she thought I was sleeping, moving numbers around on a piece of paper like she was trying to solve a math problem that didn't have an answer. I didn't know those shoes were Italian leather, hand-stitched, the kind that were made specifically for one person's feet in a small workshop in Florence by a man whose family had been making shoes for 4 generations. I just knew they were the most beautiful shoes I had ever seen in my life, and they were hiding behind our dumpster, along with the rest of him. I had come down to the alley behind our apartment building on Clement Street in San Francisco the way I came down every Thursday evening, which was trash night, which meant it was my job to take the bags from our 3rd-floor apartment down the back stairs and put them in the big green dumpster that smelled like the whole world had given up. Mama always worked late on Thursdays. The mall where she worked as a custodian, that's what the name tag said, custodian, though the people who worked there just called her the sweeper lady, and not always kindly, stayed open until 10 on Thursdays, and Mama's shift didn't end until 11 because she had to wait for the floors to empty before she could mop the food court. So Thursday evenings were mine. I was not afraid of the alley. I want you to understand that. Some people hear that an 8-year-old girl was alone in an alley behind an apartment building in San Francisco, and they get a certain look on their face, a pinched, worried look, like they are calculating the danger of my childhood from the safety of their own. But I knew that alley better than I knew anything. I knew which step on the back stairs was loose and would catch your foot if you didn't step to the left side of it. I knew that Mr. Ackhaffer in 2B always left his window open on Thursdays, and you could smell his jollof rice all the way down to the alley, and it was the best smell in the world. I knew that the orange cat who had no name but who I called Senator, because he walked with the confidence of a man who believed he was owed things, would be sitting on the fire escape railing waiting for me to scratch behind his ears. I knew that alley. So when I came through the back door with 2 heavy bags and something moved behind the dumpster, I didn't scream. I stopped. I set the bags down slowly the way my mama had taught me when she said, baby, if you're ever somewhere and something feels wrong, don't run yet. Running tells whatever is wrong where you are. Stop first. Listen. I stopped. I listened. And I heard breathing, not Senator's breathing. Not the breathing of a raccoon, which I had encountered twice before and which smells a specific way I will not describe here. This was a person's breathing, deep and ragged and trying very hard to be quiet and failing. I know you're there, I said. The breathing stopped completely for 1 second, then it came back faster. "I'm not going to scream," I said. "I just want you to know that I know, because it feels rude to pretend I don't." Silence. "Are you hurt?" I asked. More silence. And then, so quietly I almost thought I imagined it. "Yes." I picked up my trash bags, walked to the dumpster, threw them in, brushed my hands on my jeans the way Mama always did, and then I walked around to the back side of the dumpster where the brick wall made a little corner. And there he was. He was tall. Even crouched down with his knees pulled up and his back against the wall, I could tell he was very tall. He had black hair that was slightly too long, pushed back from his face like he had been running and the wind had done that to it. His suit was dark gray, and even with what I could now see was definitely blood soaking through the left side of it. Even with the dirt on his knees, and the way his collar was torn and hanging, even with all of that, the suit was so clearly expensive that it looked wrong behind a dumpster in our alley. The way a painting looks wrong leaning against a gas station wall. His face was, I didn't have a word for it then. I have words for it now. Devastatingly handsome is the phrase that comes to mind, though I am aware that sounds like the beginning of a different kind of story. What I mean is that he had the kind of face that looked like it was used to being in charge of rooms, and right now it was not in charge of anything, and the gap between those two things was written all over him. He looked at me. His eyes were dark brown, nearly black, and they were afraid. I had never seen a grown man look afraid before. My father left when I was 3, and I don't remember his face. The men in our building were mostly tired, not afraid. My teachers at school were not afraid. The men on television were not afraid, or if they were, the fear looked like a costume they put on and took off again. This man's fear was real, and it was in his eyes, and it was looking directly at me and asking me something it didn't have words for yet. "What's wrong with your side?" I asked. He looked down at his hand pressing against the dark stains spreading through the gray fabric. There were people, I ran, I think something caught me. Glass maybe, from the window. "You need to come upstairs," I said. He blinked. "Excuse me?" "My mama has a first aid kit. The real kind, not the kind with the little cartoon Band-Aids. She got it because our neighbor Mr. Ockhaffer's grandson cut his hand on the fire escape last year and the ambulance took 45 minutes and she said that was unacceptable and went and bought a real first aid kit the next day. It has gauze and everything." He stared at me. "I'm Amara," I said. "Amara Johnson. I'm 8. I live on the 3rd floor. You can come up the back stairs and no one will see you." "Why?" he said slowly, like someone who could not quite process what was happening to him. "Would you help me?" I thought about it seriously, the way my teacher, Ms. Patterson, had taught us to think about questions before we answered them, because a fast answer is not always a true answer. "Because you're hurt," I said finally, "and you're scared. And those are both real things, even if I don't know yet why they're happening." He looked at me for a very long time. Then he said, "I'm James." "Okay, James," I said. "Can you walk?" He could walk, but not well. He held onto the railing on the back stairs the whole way up, and I stayed just behind him in case he fell, which in retrospect was not a useful position because he was at least 6'2" and I was 4' nothing, and if he had fallen backward, he would have taken me with him all the way to the bottom. But it felt right to be there. It felt right to be close. I unlocked our apartment door with the key I wore on a lanyard around my neck. The lanyard was purple with little gold stars on it. Mama had bought it at the dollar store and said, "This is your responsibility key, which means you carry it responsible," and pushed the door open. Our apartment was small. I want to be clear about this because I think it matters. It was a one-bedroom apartment on Clement Street in San Francisco, which is already a sentence that contains more financial tragedy than most people realize. Mama slept in the bedroom. I slept on the pull-out sofa in the living room, which was also the dining room, which was also where Mama did her paperwork and where I did my homework, and where we watched our small television together on Friday nights with a bowl of popcorn between us, which was our best tradition and the thing I looked forward to most every week. The apartment was small and it was old, and the ceiling in the bathroom had a water stain shaped like a rooster that Mama had tried to cover with paint twice, and the rooster kept coming back. And the window in the kitchen only opened halfway, and the carpet in the living room was the color of something that had given up on being a color. But my Mama kept it clean. That is the thing I want you to understand. We did not have much. But what we had was clean, and it was cared for, and there were real curtains on the windows, not the plastic kind. Because Mama had sewn them herself from fabric she bought at the discount place on Geary. And there were photographs on the refrigerator and a little plant on the windowsill that I had been growing since second grade from a seed my teacher gave me, and which was now tall enough that it needed a bigger pot. But I was afraid to repot it in case it died, and that felt like too much loss. And James stood in the doorway of our apartment and looked at all of this. I don't know what he saw. I know what I hoped he didn't see, which was the tired, the small, the not enough of it all. But his face, when I glanced up at him, wasn't doing the thing I feared. He wasn't calculating. He wasn't pitying. He was just looking, the way you look at something that is different from what you know. "Sit down on the couch," I said. "I'll get the kit." "You shouldn't. I don't want to get blood on your—" "Sit down, James," I said. He sat. I got the first aid kit from under the bathroom sink where Mama kept it in a Ziploc bag inside a shoebox because she believed in organized storage. I got a clean washcloth and I ran it under warm water from the kitchen sink, and I brought all of it to the coffee table and I said, "Can you take your jacket off?" He looked at me with that same expression he'd had in the alley. Like he was trying to figure out what category of real I belonged to. "I'm going to need you to take your jacket off," I said again, more patiently this time. He took it off slowly, and then he unbuttoned the side of his shirt. The buttons were small and round, and I noticed even then that they were not plastic. They were something else. Shell maybe, mother of pearl, which I had learned about in a book from the library. And underneath the shirt, the cut wasn't as bad as the blood had made it look. It was long, maybe 4 inches along his left side, and it had stopped bleeding mostly, but the edges were open and it needed to be cleaned and covered. I knew how to do this. Mama had taught me. She believed in practical knowledge. I cleaned it carefully with the antiseptic from the kit, and he made a sharp sound through his teeth when the antiseptic touched the cut. And I said, "I know, I'm sorry," without looking up from what I was doing because I needed to focus, and also because something about his pain made me feel a thing I didn't have a name for yet, a pulling feeling in my chest, like a string being tugged. How do you know how to do this? He asked, his voice tight. Mama taught me, I said. She says knowing how to take care of people is the most important thing a person can know. I felt him look at me. She sounds like a remarkable woman, he said. She is, I said. She's the most remarkable person I know. She works very hard, and she doesn't complain, and she makes the best biscuits in the world. And sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping, I can hear her crying at the kitchen table. But when I come out, she pretends. She was just tired, and she smiles at me. And the smile is real even though the crying was real too. And I think that's the most remarkable thing about her. That she can have both things at the same time. The apartment was very quiet after I said that. I put the gauze over the cut and secured it with medical tape and sat back on my heels and looked at my work the way Mama looked at a mopped floor, checking for things I might have missed. There, I said, you need to keep that clean. Change the bandage tomorrow. Thank you, Amara. You're welcome. I started packing the first aid kit back up because Mama had a specific way it needed to be organized. Can I ask you something? After what you just did for me, you can ask me anything. Who were those people? The ones you were running from? He was quiet for a moment. Outside, through the half-open kitchen window, I could hear Mr. Ockhaffer's television, and from further away, the sound of Clement Street, the buses, the restaurant sounds, the ordinary city noise that was the backdrop of my whole life. Business people, he said finally. People who are angry with me. People who wanted something from me that I wouldn't give them, and they decided to make that a physical conversation. Are they going to come here? No, they don't know where I am. I ducked into the alley before they saw which way I turned. He paused. I don't think so. I don't think they'd expect me to be here. I thought about what here meant in the way he said it. I understood. You're safe, I said. This is a safe place. He looked at me then with something so complicated in his eyes that I felt it land on me like a weight, gentle but real. I believe you, he said. And somehow I knew he wasn't only talking about the alley. I need to tell you a little bit about my life before James so you understand what James changed, and what it didn't change, and what it revealed. My name is Amara Johnson, and I was 8 years old, and I lived with my mother, whose name was Diana Johnson, in apartment 3C on Clement Street in the Richmond district of San Francisco. My mother was 31 years old at the time of this story, which means she had me when she was 23, which I did not learn until later, and which made me understand certain things about the tired in her eyes that I had previously attributed only to the job. My father's name I know from documents and not from memory. His name was Robert, and he left when I was 3, and my mother never said a bad word about him in front of me, which is a kind of grace that I did not appreciate until I was much older and understood how hard it must have been to hold that grace in her mouth day after day. She just said, "Your father had things he needed to figure out, baby." And then she changed the subject to something real and present and ours. Mama worked at the Westfield Mall on Market Street. She had been working there for 4 years. She wore a green uniform with the mall's logo on the breast pocket, and she carried a mop and a rolling bucket and a cart with cleaning supplies, and she cleaned the bathrooms and the food court and the common areas. She started at 6 in the morning and sometimes didn't finish until midnight depending on the shift. She made $17.50 an hour, which I also did not know at the time but have since calculated and understood. She never complained about the job in front of me. What she did in front of me was this. She came home and she took off her shoes at the door, always, no matter how tired, no matter how late. She took her shoes off at the door because she said you should leave the day outside when you came home, or as much of it as you could, and she washed her hands and face at the kitchen sink. And then she came to wherever I was and she hugged me like I was the best thing that had happened to her all day. And I believed her. I still believe her, because the hug was never performed. It was never the hug of a woman going through emotion. It was the hug of a woman who had been away from the thing that mattered most and was now returned to it. That was our life. Evenings, when she was home early, we did my homework together at the kitchen table, and she was better at math than I was, and I was better at reading than she was, and we each silently accepted the other's superiority in their area without making it a thing. Fridays were popcorn and TV. Sundays were church in the morning. We went to a small Baptist church on Geary where the choir had 12 people and sang like they were 300. And then the dollar store, and then whatever small thing Mama could afford that week for fun, which was sometimes a soft pretzel from the cart outside the park, and sometimes a trip to the library, which was free, and which Mama treated with the same energy as a trip to Disneyland, so it felt like one. I was not a sad child. I want you to hear that clearly because I think sometimes when people hear a story like this one, they assume the child must have been sad, must have been aware of the lack, must have been carrying a specific grief about the smallness of things. But I was not sad. I was Amara. I had Mama. I had Senator the cat on the fire escape. I had Mr. Ockhaffer's jollof rice smell on Thursday evenings. I had a library card and a window seat and a plant I had grown from a seed. I was not sad, but I was lonely in a way I didn't have language for yet. The kind of lonely that isn't about having no one but is about sensing that something in the shape of your life is missing a piece. The way a puzzle is still a puzzle even when it's almost complete, but you can see the exact outline of what isn't there. I didn't know what that piece was. Until the Thursday evening, I met a man hiding behind my dumpster. He stayed for 2 hours that first night. We sat in our living room, and I made him tea because Mama always said tea was what you offered a person when they had been through something. The way other cultures offer water or wine or something stronger. But our tradition was tea, and I heated the water in the kettle and I put in one of the good tea bags, the chamomile ones that were for special occasions, because whatever this was, it felt like it qualified. And I brought it to him in the blue mug with the chipped handle that was Mama's favorite, and then felt briefly alarmed by the choice of the chipped mug. But he held it with both hands the way people hold things they are grateful for, and I decided the chip didn't matter. I sat across from him on the edge of the coffee table, and I asked him questions. I was not nosy. I was curious, which is different. Nosy is wanting to know things because knowing them makes you feel larger. Curious is wanting to know things because the world is endlessly interesting and people are the most interesting part of it. Mama had given me that distinction early. I asked him where he was from. He said originally from Atlanta, Georgia. That he'd moved to San Francisco when he was 24 for work, and had stayed because San Francisco was the kind of city that caught certain people and didn't let go. I asked him what kind of work. He paused before answering in a way that I noticed. Technology, he said. Software. I started a company when I was 26. We make systems, programs that help businesses run better. He said this in the way that people describe things when they're trying to make them sound smaller than they are. I didn't push it. I filed it. I asked him if he had family. Something moved across his face like a cloud across a clear sky. My parents both passed, he said, when I was in my late 20s. And I don't have anyone close, not the way you mean. That's lonely, I said. Yes, he said, without trying to argue with it or dress it up. It is. I respected that. I have always respected people who don't lie about the hard things. I asked him if he was going to be okay. He looked at me across the rim of the chipped blue mug, and something in his face shifted. Not like a cloud this time. Like a light turning on in a room that had been dark for a long time. I think so, he said, because of you. I just put a bandage on you, I said. No, he said. You did more than that, and I think you know it. I didn't argue. I was 8, but I wasn't naive. We heard the key in the front door at 11:47. I know the time because the clock on the microwave was the clock I always checked when I was staying up later than I was supposed to, and 11:47 was approximately 47 minutes past when I should have been in bed. Mama came through the door the way she always came through the door, shoes off first. And then she looked up and she saw me sitting on the coffee table, and she saw James on the couch with a cup of tea and a bandage visible through his open shirt, and she went very still in the way that I knew from experience was not the stillness before an explosion. It was the stillness of her brain working very fast. Amara, she said, her voice perfectly calm. Who is this? This is James, I said. He was hurt in the alley. I brought him up and fixed his cut. He's safe, Mama. I checked. Mama looked at James. James stood up, which I think was the right move, and he said, Ma'am, I'm sorry for being in your home without your permission. Your daughter, and then he stopped because I think he realized he didn't have words for what I had done that were big enough to fit in regular sentences. Mama looked at him for a very long time. She had mama eyes, which was a thing I had noticed other people noticing. This quality she had of being able to see through things, not in a hostile way, but in a thorough way, the way light goes all the way through certain kinds of glass. Are you in danger? She asked him. No, ma'am, he said. Not anymore. I'll leave right now if you want me to. I don't want to. Sit back down, she said. I'll make more tea. And she walked past him to the kitchen, and I caught her eye as she passed me. And in that eye was 1,000 things, including a question I would have to answer and a calculation she was making, and underneath all of it, something I recognized as Mama's core operating principle, which she had stated to me directly on more than one occasion. When someone is hurting and scared and a child brought them to you, that is not an accident. That is a call. She answered the call. If I told you that night changed everything, it would be true, but it would also be the wrong shape for what happened. Because what happened didn't happen all at once. It happened the way morning happens, so gradually you can't point to the exact second the dark became light, and then suddenly you look around and everything is visible. James left that first night at 1 in the morning with a bandage on his side and Mama's phone number in his pocket, which she had given him and said, for emergencies, because she believed in practical solutions. He had offered her money before he left, not awkwardly, just as a fact. He said, "Please let me." And Mama had looked at him in the Mama way and said, "I don't take money for being a decent human being." And he had said, "I know," and had nodded once and left. 3 days later, a grocery delivery showed up at our door. More food than I had ever seen arrive at our apartment all at once. Good food. The kind of food Mama sometimes stood in front of at the store and touched and then didn't put in the cart. Strawberries in the middle of winter. The good bread. Coffee that smelled so rich just opening the bag was an event. There was a note. It said, "A small thank you. James, no last name, no return address." Mama stood at the door looking at the boxes for a long time. "Mama," I said, "he's just being grateful." She looked at me. "How do you know that?" "Because his face told me," I said. She was quiet for another moment. Then she picked up one of the boxes and brought it inside. 2 weeks after that, James came back. This time, he rang the front buzzer like a normal person and stood at the door with his hands in his jacket pockets. And when Mama answered, he said he had been thinking about the best way to say thank you and had decided the only way was to say it in person. He said he was sorry if it was intrusive. He said he could go. Mama looked at him in the doorway and then she looked past him at me, where I had appeared beside her hip the way I did when I needed to know what was happening, and she made a decision I could see being made in her face. "Have you eaten?" she said. "Not yet," he said. "Then come in," she said. "I made too much anyway." This was not true. Mama never made too much. She cooked exact amounts with the precision of someone for whom ingredients cost real money. But she had made enough for 3, which meant she had been hoping he would come, or something in her had known he would, and she had made space for him at the table the way you make space for something you aren't sure of yet, but aren't ready to close the door against. We had dinner. It was spaghetti, which was a Tuesday dinner, and it was perfect the way Mama's spaghetti was always perfect, and James ate it with the focused attention of someone who was tasting something real for maybe the first time in a long time. He had 3 helpings. Mama watched him with an expression I had not seen on her face before, something between amusement and something softer, and I sat between them and ate my pasta and felt the geometry of the table change. There is a particular thing that happens when 2 people are trying not to notice each other. A particular quality to the non-noticing that is exactly as loud as the noticing would be. I was 8, and I was excellent at watching people, and I noticed. I did not say anything. I was not yet 8.5. I had time. They called me the little matchmaker later, when later became a thing we could talk about, and I always corrected them. I was not a matchmaker. I was a witness. I didn't make anything happen. I just had the very good sense not to get in the way of something that was already happening. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before the happiness, there was a lot of hard. The hard came in stages, and each stage I want you to feel with me, because this story is not a fairy tale, or rather, it is not the kind of fairy tale where the difficulty is decorative. The difficulty in this story is structural. It is the wall that everything else was built against. James came to dinner 4 more times in the month after that first night, always on a day Mama was home. Always with a kind of careful hesitation at the door that I thought was one of the most interesting things about him, given the rest of what he was. I knew by then, though I hadn't been told directly, that James was not just a technology person in the ordinary sense. The shoes had told me first, and then the way he moved in our small apartment told me. The way a person moves when they are used to spaces that don't require managing, that don't require turning sideways to get past furniture, that don't require looking at the ceiling and measuring. He moved carefully in our apartment, not because he was clumsy, but because he was aware of his size relative to the space, and he didn't want to impose. But at the door, he hesitated every single time. I asked him about it once. We were in the kitchen, Mama was in the bathroom getting changed after work and James, and I were at the kitchen table, and I was doing my math homework, and he was helping me with a word problem about trains going different speeds, which was the kind of problem I found irritating, because in real life I had never been on a train and why would I care, and I just asked him. I said, James, why do you always look like you're asking permission at the door even when Mama already told you to come? He was quiet for a moment, looking at my math paper. Because she should be able to take it back, he said finally. Take what back? The invitation, anytime, I want her to know she can. I thought about that. She can, I said. Mama takes things back all the time when they stop being right. She's very good at that. I know, he said. That's why it matters to show her I know she can. I went back to my math problem. I understood something then that I didn't have complete language for. That James was a man who was trying very hard not to use his size, in every sense of the word, as a crowbar. That the hesitation at the door was a form of respect that was specific to what he was and what we weren't, and that he was doing it consciously, deliberately, because something in him understood that the difference between his life and our life was a fact that required handling. I added him to my list of remarkable people. The list had 2 names on it before that. Mama and Ms. Patterson, my second-grade teacher who had given me the plant seed and who had told me once, quietly after school, that I had the kind of mind the world needed more of, and that I should not let anyone convince me otherwise. James became the 3rd name on that list. The problem started at the mall. I say started because problems rarely appear fully formed. They accumulate. They build like the water stain on our bathroom ceiling. A little more every week until one day you look up and there's a rooster where there used to be just a ceiling. Mama worked with a woman named Cheryl, who had been at the mall for 9 years, and who held the unofficial title of most important person in the custodial staff, by virtue of being the one who trained everyone new and knew where everything was, and had the ear of the floor managers. Cheryl was not a bad person at her core. I want to be clear about that. She was a tired person. She was a person who had been doing a hard job for a long time and had developed a set of strong opinions about how things worked and who deserved what as a way of making sense of a world that didn't always distribute things fairly. One of Cheryl's strong opinions was about Diana Johnson. Mama was better at the job than Cheryl, and I think they both knew it, and Cheryl's response to this was to find every small infraction, every deviation from the way things had always been done, and name it loudly in the break room where the floor managers could hear. Mama's cart was in the wrong bay. Mama had used the wrong cleaner on the food court tile. Mama had talked to a customer for too long instead of moving on to the next section. None of these things were true, or they were true in the way that all rules are technically true, but only become violations when someone with a reason to enforce them decides to enforce them. I knew about Cheryl the way I knew about a lot of things Mama didn't tell me directly, which was through the change in Mama when she came home on nights Cheryl had been particularly active. The way Mama's shoulders sat differently. The extra few seconds she spent washing her face at the kitchen sink. The way she was almost too cheerful with me on those nights, the brightness turned up slightly higher than usual, compensating. I said to her once, "Mama, something happened at work." And she said, "Baby, everything's fine." And I let it go because she had given me the smile that meant she meant it, the real smile, and so I believed the fine even if I didn't believe the nothing happened. But then the thing with the floor manager happened. His name was Greg. He was the floor manager for the entire East Wing, which included the food court and 3 restrooms and the common area where the fountain was, and the benches where old men sat and watched people. And he had been telling Mama for 6 months that she was doing a good job in the specific way that men sometimes tell women things that are compliments on the surface and something else underneath. Greg had decided that Mama was interested in him. Mama was not interested in him. Mama was politely professional with him in the way you have to be politely professional with the person who decides your schedule and your hours, and whether your evaluations say good or excellent. The politeness was professional. Greg had mistaken it for personal. When Mama made it clear, as gently as she possibly could, that she was not interested, Greg's warmth became a cold thing. Her hours were cut. She was moved from the food court, which had predictable hours and regular breaks, to the West Wing bathrooms, which had irregular traffic and required working split shifts that made it nearly impossible to get home before I was asleep. Cheryl, watching all of this, chose Greg's side in the way that people sometimes choose the side of the powerful person, because the powerful person controls the schedules. I am telling you this not to make you angry, though I understand if you are, because I was angry and I was 8, and I am angrier now with the full understanding of what it all meant. I am telling you this because this is the context in which James re-entered the picture, and I want you to understand what the picture looked like before he did. Mama was losing hours, which meant less money, which was already not enough. The plant on the windowsill had not been repotted yet because I was afraid, but also because the soil was getting thin, and I didn't say so because good potting soil cost money, and I understood. The way children understand things when they've been paying close attention to their parents' faces for 8 years. That money was a very tight thing right now. I had stopped asking for things. I had not made this decision consciously. It had just happened, the way these things happen in children of mothers who are struggling. You begin to self-edit, you begin to measure your wants against the available resources, and when the gap is too large, you simply stop wanting out loud. Wanting in private is different. I still wanted. I wanted new shoes for school because mine had a hole in the left toe that I covered with a piece of electrical tape, which mostly worked, but on rainy days did not. I wanted the birthday party that I was not having because birthdays cost things. I wanted, and this is the one I have never said out loud to anyone, not until now. I wanted someone else in the apartment when I got home from school, someone who was mine in a specific way, someone who could be both the person I told things to and the person who already knew me well enough that I didn't have to start from the beginning every time. I wanted a dad. I am saying that clearly because I think it matters. Because I was 8, and I was in a specific kind of need that had nothing to do with money or shoes or birthday parties, and everything to do with a shape that was missing. And then I found James, or James found me, or the universe arranged a Thursday evening the way it needed to be arranged and put a man with expensive shoes behind my dumpster. And something in me recognized the shape before I had words for it. James came to dinner on a Wednesday night in January, which was not his regular day, and I knew something was different because he arrived with a specific kind of quiet around him, not the careful, hesitating quiet of the door, but a focused quiet, a having thought about something quiet. Mama made chicken and rice. We ate. I watched them talk the way I always watch them talk, cataloging. The way Mama touched her ear when she was thinking, the way James leaned forward slightly when she was speaking, giving her the full weight of his attention in a way that I noticed made Mama's voice change, made it go from the voice she used at work to something closer to the voice she used at church when she was singing, and the music had taken her somewhere real. After dinner, I was supposed to do homework, but the kind of homework I had that night was reading, and reading can happen on a couch with one ear available, and so I was on the couch with my book, and they were at the kitchen table with their tea, and James said very quietly, "I heard about what's happening at the mall." Silence from Mama, the specific silence of someone who is deciding how much to confirm. "I have a contact there," he said. "I didn't ask anyone to look into anything. It came to me through other connections. I want you to know that I'm not surveilling your life. It just, some information moves through certain circles and, James," Mama said. "Yes. How much do you know?" "Enough," he said. "The floor manager, the hours. Sure." Mama said nothing. "I want to help," he said. "I know you do," Mama said. But I have been taking care of myself and Amara for 5 years," she said, and her voice was quiet and even and not angry, just truthful, the way she was when she meant something completely. "And I know that sounds like I'm saying I don't need help. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the way you help matters as much as the help. And I need to be the one who handles it," he said. "Who handles it?" she agreed. He was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Okay." She said like she was testing it. "Okay," he said again. "Then let me ask you something different. Is there anything that isn't handling the situation that I can do? Not to fix it, not to go around you, just for you, as a person, not as a problem to solve." Very long silence. "I don't know," she said, and it was the most honest thing I'd heard from Mama in a long time, which was saying something given that my mother was the most honest person I knew. She said it like she was surprised to find she didn't know. like the question had reached a part of her that hadn't been asked questions in a while. I looked at my book and did not look at them. "Can I tell you something?" James said. "Yes," Mama said. "I've been in a lot of rooms with a lot of people. I've run a company since I was 26. I've negotiated things and managed things and built things. And I'm good at those parts. But I don't know how to be in a regular room. A room that isn't about something. A room that's just a room, and this kitchen." He paused. "This kitchen is the first room in a long time that felt like just a room, and I don't know exactly what to do with that except to say it out loud." I heard Mama put her mug down on the table. I did not look up. "Okay," she said very softly. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. "Subscribe to Black Diamonds right now and turn on the notifications bell so you never miss a story like this one. Drop your name and your city in the comments below. I want to know where in this wide world you're watching from tonight. Because this story is for every one of you, and I need to know you're here. What happened at the mall did not resolve quietly. I want you to know that because stories like this one often get told as though the moment of love makes the difficulty disappear, and it does not. It never does. Love changes what you can survive. It does not change what you have to survive." Greg's retaliation for Mama's firmness about not being interested in him continued through January and into February. Her evaluations, which had previously been excellent, I know this because Mama kept them in the important papers folder in the shoebox under her bed, and I had read them all, began to say things like needs improvement in efficiency, and has been spoken to about communication with management. These were lies. They were the specific lies of a small person using the limited power of his position to punish a woman for having boundaries, and they were being documented, and documented lies are particularly dangerous because they accumulate on paper and paper has a long memory. Mama knew what was happening. She was not naive. She had started keeping her own records, dates and times, and what was said, in a small spiral notebook she kept in her apron pocket during shifts. She had done her research. She knew her rights. She was building a case with the careful patience of a woman who understood that acting too fast meant acting with incomplete information, and incomplete information loses. But it was costing her. I could see it costing her in ways she didn't show me directly. The way she checked the mail with a specific held tension in her face. The way she balanced the checkbook at the kitchen table on Sunday mornings with a pencil instead of a pen so she could erase things and move them around. In March, something happened that changed the story. James came to dinner on a Thursday, a real Thursday, trash night Thursday, almost exactly 2 months after the alley, and he came with something he had been working up to for a while. I could see it the moment he came through the door. The focused quiet again, but warmer this time, and something else underneath it that I didn't have a word for yet at 8.5. Mama made soup. We ate. I went to the couch with my book. James put something on the table. I looked up. It was a folder, legal looking, the kind of folder that had important words on the tab. "I want to show you something," he said to Mama, "and I need you to hear the whole thing before you say anything." Mama looked at the folder the way she looked at the mail when she was afraid of what was in it. "All right," she said. "I own the mall," he said. Very long silence. "The Westfield," Mama said very carefully. "The whole property," he said, "through one of my holding companies. I've owned it for 3 years. I'm in the process of a major renovation and rebranding, which means there's going to be a restructuring of management. Mama was very still. I am not doing this as I am not doing this for you, he said, and then immediately corrected himself. That came out wrong. What I mean is this was already in motion. The restructuring, the decision about management. These are business decisions that predate you, that predate the alley, that predate all of this. I didn't manufacture this. When my team gave me the report on current management performance, Greg's name came up in a way that required action. The numbers on customer satisfaction in his section are significantly below target. His personnel management, the things he's done have been documented independently by my people, not just by you. Mama said nothing. I wanted to show you the documentation, he said. Because I didn't want you to think I didn't want this to be something I did to impress you or to come in and fix things. I wanted you to see that it was already happening, that you were building your own case, that your case and my business case they just happen to be the same case. He slid the folder across the table toward her. She looked at it for a long moment without touching it. James, she said. Yes. You own the mall where I mop floors. Yes, he said. And the way he said it was the most important part of everything he said that evening. Because he said it without any of the things it could have had, no embarrassment, no pity, no the awkward thing we're not saying quality that would have made it the thing they could not come back from. He said it simply, like a fact among facts, like it was one true thing sitting next to another true thing, and the space between them was just space. I mop floors at a building you own, she said again. You do exceptional work, he said, which I know because your supervisor evaluations from before Greg are all excellent, and because I walked that food court floor 3 months ago, and it was cleaner than any floor I have walked in any building I have ever owned. Something moved across Mama's face. I couldn't tell from the couch exactly what it was. I thought it might be the thing that happens when you've been holding something up for so long that when someone else reaches out to help hold it, you don't know yet whether to let them. What do you want from me? She said, not unkindly, like a woman who has been offered things before and has learned that offers come with structures. Nothing, he said. I want nothing from you, not in the way you mean. Then in what way? He stopped, started again. I want to be in this kitchen. I want to help Amara with her math homework. I want to know what kind of tea you prefer and whether there's a reason you always make too little soup when I'm here, even though I've had 3 helpings every time and you've never once looked like it was a burden. Mama was quiet for a moment. I make less soup when I want an excuse to go back to the kitchen, she said, very quietly. The room was extremely quiet after she said that. Okay, James said. Okay, she said. I turned a page of my book that I had not been reading. And now I need to tell you about the day at school. Because no story about a child is complete without the place where the child is most herself and most exposed, and I need you to have this piece before we get to what came next. In April, 2 weeks after the dinner with the folder, my class had a thing called Family Career Day where parents came to school to talk about their jobs. It happened every year. The previous year I had stayed home sick, actually sick, with a fever, and had missed it. This year I was healthy and present and absolutely unable to get out of it. I had not invited Mama. I want to sit with that sentence for a moment because it was the worst thing I did in this entire story, and I need you to understand why I did it, and also why it was wrong, and also how I felt about it afterward, which was terrible, which was what I deserved. I had not invited Mama because I knew what she would say when they asked about her job, and I knew how it would be received, and I was not brave enough to be in the room when it happened. I was 8.5. I was in a class with children whose parents were doctors and software engineers and real estate agents and a woman who trained dolphins at the aquarium. I loved my mother with every piece of me. And I was ashamed, not of her, I want to be clear, because Mama never gave me reason to be ashamed of her. I was ashamed of myself for what I knew I would feel. The shame of the anticipation is worse than the thing itself. That is a thing I know now. A girl in my class named Brianna had a father who was a tech CEO who came in on career day in a Tesla and wore a jacket that cost more than our rent and talked for 40 minutes about disrupting industries. And when he was done, the whole class clapped, and Ms. Patterson said, "Thank you so much, Mr. Davis." That was fascinating. And Brianna sat in her chair with a particular kind of satisfaction that was about more than just the presentation. James was a tech CEO. I had put that together by then. I had done some research at the library computer, the way I researched things that I wanted to know but hadn't been told. I had found his name in articles. James Harrison. Harrison Tech. Net worth, the article said, and then a number that I had to read 3 times because the zeros kept being more than I thought they were. I had looked at that number for a long time. Then I had closed the browser window. Then I had sat for a few minutes in the library with the plant from a seed feeling, the feeling of something small and alive that was growing in a direction I hadn't planned for and wasn't sure I was ready for. Then I had gone home and done my homework. Career day came and went, and I sat through it, and a boy named Tyler's dad talked about being a plumber, which was actually extremely interesting. Because he brought pipe samples and Tyler looked proud and not embarrassed at all, and I thought about that for a long time afterward. About Tyler and the pipe samples and the pride. I went home that afternoon and Mama was home early, which happened occasionally, and she was at the kitchen table with paperwork, and she looked up when I came in and said, "How was school today?" And I said, "Fine." And she said, "How was career day?" And I said, "Fine." And she looked at me with the Mama look. "I didn't invite you," I said. My voice was very small. She was quiet. "I was scared," I said. "I was scared of how people would look at you, not at you because of you." "At you because of what you?" I couldn't finish it. "Because I mop floors," she said. "Yes," I said, and started crying, which I had not expected to do. Mama got up from the table and came to me and got down on her knees so she was at my eye level, which was a thing she did when she needed me to hear something all the way. "Amara," she said, "look at me." I looked at her. "I mop floors so you can have a floor to come home to," she said. "Do you understand what that means?" "Yes," I said. "I don't think you do yet," she said gently. "But you will. There is no shame in the work that keeps a family alive. There is no shame in being the person who cleans up after other people's messes, because that is the work that was available and you took it and you did it with everything you had. The shame belongs to the people who look down at that work, not the person doing it." She cupped my face. I am not embarrassed by my job, she said. I need you to hear that. And I need you not to be embarrassed for me, because when you're embarrassed for me, you're adding something to what I carry, and I would rather carry my own weight. I cried harder. I'm sorry, Mama, I said. I know, she said. You are forgiven, completely. She pulled me in. But next year, you invite me. And I will come in that building and I will stand up in front of your class and I will tell them that I keep things clean for a living and I will tell them why that matters and I will do it with my whole chest. Okay? Okay, I said into her shoulder. Good, she said. We stayed like that for a while. Then she said, against my hair, Is there something else you want to tell me? I thought about the library computer, about the number with all the zeros. Not yet, I said, but soon. She held me tighter. Okay, she said, when you're ready. The restructuring at the mall happened in late April. Greg was transferred to a different property in a different city, which was a professional consequence dressed in professional language. And Mama's hours were restored, and her evaluation was formally corrected, and the 2 false evaluations were expunged from her record, which she had requested in writing with the documentation from her spiral notebook, and which the new management had no reasonable basis to deny. Cheryl apologized to Mama in the break room one afternoon, privately, just the 2 of them. And Mama told me about it later that evening in a way that was careful and fair. The way she always was about people, saying that Cheryl was tired and afraid and had made choices that weren't right but came from a place that was understandable. And that forgiveness wasn't about saying what happened was okay. It was about not letting what happened take up more of your future than it had already taken of your past. I thought about that for days. James did not speak about the mall directly. He knew Mama knew, and she knew he knew, and the shape of what had happened between them had room for it without requiring that it be talked to death. What they did instead was continue having dinner. And the dinners were changing, not in big ways. In the way that things change when people are actually getting comfortable rather than performing comfort, the conversations went to stranger places, more personal places, places that required trust to enter. James talked about his parents for the first time. His mother had been a school teacher in Atlanta, and his father had worked in logistics, and they had saved carefully and sacrificed real things to send James to college, and had not lived to see what he had built from the opportunity they gave him. He talked about this in a way that made his voice go to a different register, lower and more careful. The way voices go when the topic is too important for regular volume. Mama talked about my father for the first time in front of James, and I pretended to be asleep because I sensed she needed me to be asleep for this conversation. And she talked about the years of trying to understand what went wrong, and then the years of accepting that understanding wasn't always available, and that some losses you just carry. She talked about building something for me from whatever she had, which was not much but was hers, and about the way that purpose, having me, having this specific assignment of taking care of me and raising me well, had been the thing that made everything manageable, not easy, but manageable. James listened to all of this. I listened to all of this from behind my closed eyelids, from the pull-out couch in the living room that was also the dining room that was also the place where the most important conversation I had heard in my 8.5 years of life was happening 2 rooms away. Then James said, "Can I say something that might be too much?" And Mama said, "You can try." "I have been rich for a long time," he said. "Not born rich. Made rich, which is different, because you carry the before-rich self inside you even when the money has changed everything outside. And I have been lonely for a long time. Not the kind of lonely that comes from having no one around. The kind that comes from being in rooms full of people who see the wealth and not the person underneath it. And I didn't know until I was standing in your alley bleeding." He stopped, restarted. I didn't know that what I was missing had such a specific address. Silence. "James," Mama said. "Yes." "That was too much," she said. "I know," he said. "Say it again," she said. Very long silence. "The kind that has texture." He said it again. Slightly different words. Same meaning. More. I held very still on the pull-out couch and felt something in my chest do a thing that I can only describe as the sound a lock makes when the right key turns it. Now I have to tell you about the twist. Because every story has a thing underneath the story, and this one is no different. And the thing underneath this one came from a direction no one saw coming, including me, and I had been watching very carefully. His name was Marcus Webb. He was James's business partner, or had been, before the falling out that had apparently been the reason James was running in our alley on that first Thursday evening. I had not fully understood the business situation because James had never explained it completely. He had said people were angry with him and left it at that. But in May, 3 months after the alley, Marcus Webb decided to make himself part of our story in a way that was ugly and deliberate. Marcus had apparently been documenting James's visits to our apartment building. Had photographs, time-stamped, of James coming and going. And he brought these photographs to a meeting with James's board of directors and presented them alongside a story that was designed to make James look unstable, romantically compromised. And, he said, quote, distracted by an inappropriate relationship with an employee of one of his properties and her minor child. I know this because I heard James tell Mama about it on a Wednesday evening in May when I was absolutely not asleep. The words inappropriate relationship landed in the room and sat there with a specific ugliness. Mama was very quiet. "I need you to understand," James said, "that what he's doing is a power move. He wants my shares. He wants control of Harrison Tech, and the only way to get it is to discredit me with the board before the annual meeting in July. This is not actually about you or Amara. You and Amara are being used as a tool in a business dispute, and I am furious about that. I am more furious about that than I have been about anything in a very long time. Are you going to lose your company?" Mama said. "No," he said, with a firmness that was not defensive but was very sure. "Are we in danger? No, I will not let that happen." "James," Mama's voice was careful. "I need to ask you something and I need a real answer." "Okay. Did you start coming here because you needed something? Some kind of anchor or alibi or story to tell? Did our kitchen have a use?" The longest silence I have ever experienced in my life. "No," he said. His voice was different. It was the voice of someone who understood that they were being given a chance to lie and is choosing not to. Your kitchen found me. I didn't choose it for a reason. I bled into your alley and your daughter pulled me inside and made me tea in a chipped blue mug and told me I was safe, and it was the first time in years that I believed someone when they said that. Mama said nothing. But I need you to hear this too, he said. Whatever I feel, whatever this is, I will not let it cost you anything. If being connected to me through this situation puts your job at risk, I will fix that. If it puts Amara's safety at risk, I will remove myself. If the cleanest thing for your life is for me to disappear, I will disappear. I will not be another thing that a woman with too much already to carry has to carry. Very, very long silence. James, Mama said. Yes. I am going to tell you something and I need you to listen carefully. I'm listening. I have been carrying things alone for 5 years, and I am good at it. I have become very good at it. But there is a difference between being good at doing something alone and wanting to do it alone. And I have, without meaning to, without planning for it, without having any idea it was going to happen, I have started not wanting to do it alone anymore. She paused. But if you ever use me as a prop, ever, for any reason, I will be done, completely and without discussion. Do you understand me? Yes, he said. Say it like you mean it, she said. I understand, he said, and this time it was the fuller version, all the weight behind it that it needed. And then Mama said, now tell me about Marcus Webb and let's figure out what we're going to do. I nearly fell off the pull-out couch. What they figured out was this, Mama's documentation. The spiral notebook from her apron pocket. The dates and times and quotes from Greg. The formal records of the false evaluations and their correction. The paper trail of a woman who had been doing everything right in a situation that was doing everything wrong to her. All of it was relevant, because Marcus's story to the board included a claim that James's involvement with a mall employee was creating a hostile work environment and legal liability. And Mama's documentation proved the opposite, that the hostile work environment had predated James's involvement and had been created by management that was subsequently corrected through proper channels. Mama sat at the kitchen table with James, and they went through the notebook together, and Mama explained each entry in the specific voice she used for things that mattered. And James listened and asked questions and took notes on his phone. And I sat on the couch with a book in my hand and my eyes pointed at the page and my whole self pointed at the kitchen. They were extraordinary together. I don't have another word for it. Mama's precision and James's understanding of how boards and power structures worked. The way they built on each other's thinking without competing with it. The way they checked each other's assumptions with respect rather than defensiveness. It was the most adult thing I had ever witnessed, and I was 9 by then, my birthday having happened in a small celebration with James and a chocolate cake that Mama made from scratch. And I was developing a more sophisticated understanding of what adult meant. The board meeting happened in mid-July. I was not there. I was at home with Mr. Ockhafer from 2B, who babysat me on important occasions and who made me jollof rice and told me stories about growing up in Lagos and let me stay up until 10, which was an hour past my bedtime and felt deeply transgressive. James and Mama went together. not as each other's armor, not as a performance for the board. Together, because the case they were making was a case they had built together, and they presented it together, and the documentation stood on its own. Marcus Webb's motion against James failed. I know this because at 10:15 p.m., while Mr. Ockhafer was dozing in the armchair, my phone, I had a phone by then, a small old one James had given me after I had mentioned once, carefully and without asking for anything, that I sometimes felt nervous being in the apartment alone and it would be nice to be able to call Mama, lit up with a message from Mama. It said, "We're coming home. Put the kettle on." I put the kettle on. I got out 3 mugs. I used the good tea bags, all of them. They came through the door together at 11. Mama took her shoes off at the door. James, behind her, did the same. And then I saw something I had not seen before. Mama reached back without looking, just her hand extended behind her, and James took it. They stood there in the doorway of our small apartment on Clement Street, holding hands, looking at me on the couch, and Mama was smiling and James was looking at her the way the articles said he looked at companies he was about to transform, except this wasn't that. This was completely different from that. This was the look of a man who was looking at the thing he was most afraid to lose. "Did you win?" I said. "We did good work," Mama said. "How's that?" "That's good," I said. James crossed the room and sat on the couch beside me, which he had never done before. He always took the chair. And he put his arm around me, which he had also never done before, and I leaned into him, which surprised me because I hadn't known I was going to do it. And the 3 of us sat there in our small living room while the kettle came to boil, and the city made its ordinary night sounds outside, and Senator the cat yelled at us from the fire escape to be acknowledged, and Mama laughed. A real laugh, the kind from somewhere deep, and I thought, this is it. This is the missing piece. This is what the outline was shaped like. I want to talk about what justice looked like in this story. Not the dramatic kind, not the movie kind with the gavel coming down and everyone getting exactly what they deserved in a neat sequence. Real justice. The quieter kind. Greg was transferred. He did not go to prison or lose his livelihood or face the full weight of every woman he had ever punished for having boundaries. He was moved to a position where his particular capacity for harm was limited, and that is probably the most honest accounting of what accountability looks like in most workplace situations. It is imperfect. It is better than nothing. Mama said, "I am not in the business of destroying people. I am in the business of making sure they cannot keep doing what they were doing." Cheryl and Mama developed, over the following years, a relationship that I would describe as cautious mutual respect. They were not friends. They were colleagues who understood each other's history and chose, by agreement, to build forward rather than backward. Some reconciliations look like hugs, and some look like 2 people standing at adjacent sinks washing their hands and nodding at each other in the mirror. Both count. Marcus Webb's attempt to take Harrison Tech failed completely and expensively, and he left the company by mutual agreement 6 months after the board meeting, with a settlement that James described to me once, when I was older, as adequate, by which he meant adequate to the sin, which was a specific kind of accounting I found very satisfying. The apartment on Clement Street was our home for 3 more years after that night. I want to say that clearly because I think it matters that we didn't immediately move somewhere bigger and more expensive, that the story of our life with James didn't begin with a departure from who we were. James started spending more and more time with us, and then he was there most nights, and then he was there every night. And Mama and I had a conversation about what that meant, and she asked me how I felt about it in the direct way she asked me about important things. And I said, Mama, I picked him out of the alley for a reason. And she laughed that deep, real laugh and said, You did, didn't you? He proposed to Mama in our kitchen. Not in a restaurant, not on a rooftop, not with a photographer hidden behind a plant. In our kitchen. At the table with the checkbook marks on it and the Mr. Ackhafer jollof rice smell coming through the window. He got down on one knee on our carpet that was the color of something that had given up on being a color, and he said the things he needed to say, which were simple and real, and which I am not going to repeat here because they belong to Mama, and she said yes. She said yes on a Tuesday. I was doing homework at the table. I looked up when he got down on one knee and I put my pencil down and I watched. And when Mama said yes, I didn't say anything. I just got up and walked over to where they were both somehow now standing and kneeling and somewhere in between, and I put my arms around both of them as far as they would go, which was not all the way, but enough. James put his hand on the back of my head. Is that okay with you? He said into my hair. I found you, I said. Of course it's okay with me. Before I tell you the last part, I need to tell you something about the name. When I was 9.5, just before Mama and James got engaged, I started calling him Dad in my head. Not out loud. Just in my head, trying it on the way you try on a coat in a store before you decide to buy it, turning in the mirror, checking whether it fits. It fit. But I didn't say it out loud for another 6 months because I was aware that words like that land with weight, and once they land, they change the shape of everything, and I wanted to be sure, not of him. I was sure of him from the alley, but of myself. Sure that I was saying it because it was true and not because I wanted it to be true. There is a difference, and it matters, and I was old enough to know the difference. I said it for the first time on a Saturday morning. He was at the kitchen table with coffee and the newspaper. He was one of the last people alive who still read a physical newspaper, which was one of the things Mama teased him about, and I came out of the bathroom brushing my teeth and said, Dad, do we have orange juice? He looked up from the newspaper. He was very still. In the fridge, he said, behind the milk. Thank you, I said, and went back to the bathroom. I heard him put the newspaper down. I heard him be quiet in a way that had something in it. Later, when I came out for breakfast, his eyes were slightly different. Not wet, just open. Like something in them had been unlocked. He didn't say anything about it directly. Neither did I, but at breakfast he put an extra piece of toast on my plate, the good kind with the thick cut, the kind that was his, and I ate it without comment, and that was how we said what we meant. We moved into a house in the Sunset District when I was 10. Not a mansion. A house. 4 bedrooms and a real kitchen and a yard in the back where Mama grew herbs in pots and where I finally repotted my plant from the seed into a big terracotta pot that James bought and carried home on his shoulder like it was the most normal errand in the world. The plant did not die. It grew 3 new branches the first spring. I want to tell you about the day of the wedding because I think that day is what this whole story has been building toward, or one of the things. Because stories like this one don't build toward a single moment, they build toward a life. And a life has many moments, and the wedding was one of them. It was October. San Francisco in October has a specific quality of light that I have not found anywhere else. A golden lateral light that comes in the afternoon and makes everything look like the last good day of something, which sounds sad but isn't, because last good days are full in a way that regular days aren't. We got married in that light. I say we because that is the accurate word. Mama and James got married, but the three of us became something together that day. And the word for what we became is family, which is also the most ordinary and most extraordinary word in the English language. I was the flower girl. I wore a white dress with gold details that Mama had found and James had paid for, and which I had tried on in the store and turned in the mirror, and felt something that I can only describe as rightness. I had done my hair the way Mama and I had practiced for 3 Sundays, with the little braid crown at the top and the rest loose, the way Mama always did my hair for things that mattered. I walked down the aisle ahead of Mama. I scattered rose petals. And when I got to the front and turned around to watch Mama come, the church was full of the light through the high windows, and the choir from our church on Geary was singing. The 12 people who sang like 300, and Mama appeared at the back of the church in a dress the color of cream, and she was so beautiful that I felt it like something physical. And beside me, James made a sound so quiet it barely existed. I looked up at him. His face was completely unguarded. It was the face of a man who had just seen the thing he had been waiting for without knowing he was waiting. I had never seen a face like that on an adult, and I want to tell you that it was the most instructive thing I have ever witnessed in my life. More instructive than anything in school, any book, any lesson. That face told me what it looked like when love was real. Not performed, not managed, not maintained at a careful distance. Real. He was not embarrassed that I saw it. He looked down at me and smiled, not the composed smile, the real one. I reached up and took his hand. We stood there together, the two of us, waiting for Mama to come to us. And she came. If you are still with me, and I know you are, because if you weren't you would have left already, and this story does not end anywhere except where it ends, I want to say something directly to you before the last few minutes. Subscribe to Black Diamonds if you haven't already. Right now, before this video ends. Because this channel exists for the people who needed to hear this story, and there are more stories coming, and I don't want you to miss them. Hit the notification bell so you know the moment the next one arrives. Drop your name and your city in the comments below. I want to know where you're watching from tonight. I want to know if you're in Atlanta or Lagos or London or a small town where nobody talks about things like this. I want to know if this story found you the way it needed to. Because that is why we're here. I am 22 years old now as I tell you this story. I am in my 2nd year at Berkeley. I am studying sociology, which surprises people who expect me to study business, given my father's company, but does not surprise my father or my mother, because they have always known that I am most interested in the structures underneath things, the systems that make certain lives harder and certain lives easier, and why and how and what can be changed. My father, I call him Dad now without thinking about it, without the practiced coat trying quality of those early months, just reflexively, naturally, the way you refer to water as wet. My father sits on the board of 3 community organizations in San Francisco that provide housing support and job training for single parents. He did not start those organizations because he married one. He started them because when he sat in a small kitchen on Clement Street and watched a woman balance a checkbook with a pencil on a Sunday morning, something in him understood that her situation was not a personal failing. It was a system, and he knew enough about systems to know they could be changed. My mother still works. This always surprises people. They say, "Diana, you married a billionaire. Why are you still working?" And Mama looks at them with the mama look and says, "Because I'm good at it, and because it matters, and because who I am is not contingent on who I married." She does not work at the mall anymore. She runs a program. The program is called Clean Slate. Not her name, she fought them on it, but they outvoted her. And it trains custodial staff in building maintenance management and property operations. Because Mama said, the people doing the work should be the people who have pathways to running things. And James looked at her when she said that and said, "I agree. What do you need?" And she made him a list, and he funded it, and she built it, and now it operates in 4 cities. Cheryl completed the program last year. Mama told me on the phone, quietly, not making a big deal of it, the way she handles things that are significant but belong to someone else. I thought about what Mama said about forgiveness, about not letting what happened take up more of your future than it had already taken of your past. I thought about how long she had been practicing that and how hard it is to practice something that long without getting tired. I thought, that is the most remarkable thing about her. That she can have both things at the same time, the real hurt and the real grace, simultaneously, without canceling either one out. The plant from the seed is enormous now. It is in the backyard in a pot so large my father had to call someone to help him move it when we rearranged the patio last summer. It has branches going in every direction, and in the spring it flowers, small white flowers that smell the way I always imagined things should smell when I was 8 years old putting seeds in soil and hoping. I am home for a weekend, and I am sitting at the kitchen table, the real kitchen now, the one in the house in the sunset, the one with the morning light and the herbs in pots outside the window, and I am telling you this story. My father is at the table, too, across from me, reading his newspaper. He still reads a physical newspaper. He will read a physical newspaper until they stop printing them, and probably for a year after that just to make a point. My mother is cooking. She does not have to cook. She has never once behaved as though she does not have to cook. She cooks because she loves it, and because the kitchen is hers, and because the smell of things being made from scratch is the smell of a home, not a house, and she knows the difference. The kitchen smells like something good. In a minute, Dad will put down the newspaper, and he will pour Mama a cup of coffee and put it beside her at the stove without being asked, because he has been doing that every morning for 12 years, and it has become as automatic and as essential as breathing. In a minute, Mama will say thank you, baby, without turning around, and he will say of course, and they will not look at each other, but the room will change quality anyway. Will get slightly warmer the way rooms do when two people who love each other are in the same space, and the love is so settled and so certain it doesn't need performance anymore. In a minute, I will be asked to set the table. But right now, I am sitting here, and the morning light is the specific San Francisco October light, gold and lateral and final day full. And I am 22 years old, and I am telling you this story, and I need you to hear the last thing before you go. The last thing is this. I was 8 years old and I found a hurt man behind a dumpster, and I brought him inside, not because I was exceptional, not because I had some gift for recognizing things, not because the universe had chosen me for a special mission. I brought him inside because my mama had taught me that when someone is hurt and scared, that is a call, and a call requires an answer. She had taught me that by example, every single day, the way real things are always taught, not in speeches. In the daily practice of being the kind of person who opens the door. The lesson is not about billionaires. I need you to hear that clearly, because this story could be heard as a story about a billionaire who saved a family, and that would be the wrong story. The right story is about a woman who mopped floors and raised a daughter who believed in bringing hurt people inside. The money was incidental. The man was not incidental, but what made him matter was not the money. What made him matter was that he was willing to sit in a small apartment and be known, not as James Harrison, CEO, not as the net worth number on the article, but as the person who needed the chipped blue mug and the chamomile tea and the honest truth that he was safe. Most people never get that. Most people spend their whole lives waiting to be known without the things around them. He found it in our alley on a Thursday evening because a little girl with a purple lanyard around her neck and a very clear understanding of what her mama had taught her decided that the right thing to do was obvious, and the obvious thing was, bring him in. That is the whole story. That is the whole lesson. Every door you open, you don't know what's on the other side. You don't know who they'll turn out to be. You don't know what the beginning of a thing will become at the end. But the practice of opening the door is not about the outcome. It's about who you are when you open it. Be the kind of person who opens the door. The rest will follow. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If this story moved you, and I believe it did because you are here, which means you stayed, which means it found something real in you, please hit the like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You know who that person is. You thought of them somewhere in the last hour. Send it to them. Don't overthink it. Subscribe to Black Diamonds. Turn on the notification bell. We tell stories here that are about real things, love and struggle, and the specific dignity of people who are doing hard work in hard circumstances and choosing grace anyway. This channel is for you, and I mean that. I mean it for the single mothers watching this at midnight after a long shift, with a sleeping child in the next room and a checkbook that doesn't balance. I mean it for the little girls watching this who are learning what remarkable looks like by watching the closest woman in their lives. I mean it for the people who have been told you have no say and are deciding right now what to do with that. You have every say. Drop your name and your city in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. Let me know what part of this story found you. Let me know what you're carrying. And come back next week. Because the next story begins where this one ends, and it has a woman in it who is going to surprise you, and a choice that is going to make you think about every choice you have made, and an ending that I promise you will not see coming. Until then, this is Black Diamonds, and we see you.